Herzlich willkommen zur zweiten Keynote des heutigen Tages. Toll, dass ihr so zahlreich mit dabei seid. Wir sind ganz stolz, Sami Laiho heute mit dabei zu haben. Er ist Senior Technical Fellow bei MVP und ist einer der weltweit führenden Experten für Windows-Betriebssystem und Sicherheit. Er ist einer der Top-Influencer auch im Bereich IT und ist ein ausgezeichneter Redner, auch bei ganz verschiedenen Veranstaltungen. Und wir haben, wie gesagt, wir sind stolz, dass wir ihn gewinnen konnten. Der Vortrag ist in Englisch. Er sendet live aus Finnland, habe ich mir sagen lassen. Und ich übergebe jetzt gerne das Wort an ihn. Zero Trust, the new normal for IT-Security. Kurzer Hinweis natürlich auch an euch. Ihr könnt während der Session gerne auch Fragen schon eingeben. Ich werde das dementsprechend sammeln. Und falls ihr die Ansicht noch einstellen wollt, links vom Chatfenster könnt ihr über den kleinen Kreis zum Beispiel auf Fullscreen gehen oder dergleichen und könnt das ganz individuell einstellen. So, ich übergebe das Wort an Sami. Sami, the stage is yours. Have fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I actually already saw someone on the chat speaking Finnish, so that was fun. Anyway, I am super happy to be here. It's been a while since I've done conferences. Last year, I still travel. Well, the previous year, I still traveled more than 200 days a year, and now I haven't really traveled since March, except for getting a puppy from UK, but it's super nice to be here. And as there was an introduction already, I don't need to do that. I am currently near Helsinki in Finland. It's about -20 degrees outside. It's really dark and cold winter here. My topic for today is Zero Trust, the new norm for IT security. We live in a very different world now. The pandemic has heavily changed the way IT works. Even before the pandemic, 28% of all attacks were actually internal attacks, meaning 28, and this is a European number, so 28% of all attacks are by your own people. Now, you used to have your people in a kind of a confined location inside of your firewalls and inside of your office under supervision, and now everyone just takes their computer, goes back home, sits on their kitchen table and starts working. And kids are in homeschool in many countries, which means that you have to lend your computer to your kids and stuff like that. Well, you shouldn't, but I know that happens all a lot. Things have changed heavily. In Finland, things haven't changed that much, meaning that we're only disturbed by the fact that now people are telling us that we should stand 2 meters apart, although we would never really want to go that close to other people. So that's been a little bit disturbing for us. But on the other hand, the good thing is that social distancing is a norm here, which means that we have a really good situation when it comes to the pandemic. When I was speaking at Ignite, the biggest conference by Microsoft every year, and Ignite for the past few years was all about BYOD, and that stands for bring your own device, or if you ask me, that stands for bring your own disaster. Everyone was all about light management. Everyone was all about just use your own computer and we lightly manage it with Intune, and we will or some other MDM, and just let you use your own machines. That never really kicked in, and I really hated the whole concept, except in maybe schools. And luckily now, where we had the last Ignite a few months ago, purely online, Microsoft had also completely changed their mind. And instead of BYOD, everyone is now talking about Zero Trust. Zero Trust is a concept. You don't have to do it with a certain product, so it is more of a way of operating. And Zero Trust has a really kind of bad tone to it and a negative sound to it. It sounds like we don't trust our employees, we don't want them to do anything, we will not allow them to do anything. So the first thing I would really like to remind people is that the Zero Trust anyway is a thing that is supposed to make many things possible that we've all wanted for a very long time. Zero Trust means that everything can be operated from any location, meaning that you can do your work whether you're sitting on your sofa at home or whether you're at the office. And your office more changes into a facility providing another internet connection like Starbucks or another cafeteria or something like that. Zero Trust itself allows us to keep computers secure, yet keep them usable, and I mean secure, usable, and potentially even lower costs. Many people think that Zero Trust is very expensive, but it can actually dramatically lower your costs. And I have seen that in practice. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the next few slides as well. One of the biggest issues in modern environments is that you have, for example, ransomware that will encrypt your data on your machine. But the bad things really start when they start to move around your network, and this is known as lateral movement. And Zero Trust also tries to fix that by limiting the lateral movement possibilities inside of a network. So it also tries to mimic the very well-known attack called pass the hash. Zero Trust principles. One of the biggest principles in Zero Trust is that we always verify explicitly. And that means that every person is authenticated with a strong authentication. If I log on to my laptop right now, which I can't do because I'd lose you, but if I do that, I will be asked for a multi-factor authentication. That doesn't matter if I'm in the office or on the internet somewhere sitting in a Burger King or whatever. So it's always on. Even in the internal network, I need to use at least a two-factor authentication. In my case, it's a push notice sent to my phone, which I have to verify. Use least privileged access. Since 1993, the NT 3.1, the first Windows NT operating system, it had a user guide, and the user guide says that in Windows there is no security if you're logging on as an admin. The operating system's security subsystem was never built to withstand the use of admin rights. Group policies can't be enforced for admins. MDM policies can't be enforced for admins. Access control doesn't work against admins. Admins can take away any settings they want. Admins can also take any person's identity on the computer they want. And I normally do a lot of demos on this, but if you'll just go for YouTube and find like 10 ways of hacking Windows 10, or just Google for it, you'll find a lot of great examples. I hope this would be a club like Anonymous Alcoholics, but I think this is like Anonymous non-admins, and I would right now get my 18th year PIN, because I have been without admin rights now for 18 years. I removed admin rights from myself and my users in 2002. Had nothing to do with security, but I just did it because the computer works better, faster, better performance for a longer time with less reinstallations. I actually have a Swiss company as a customer, and during 2018 we removed their admin rights, and during 2019 we had 75% less tickets in help desk, which means that it also not only keeps security better, but heavily impacts the life expectancy of a Windows operating system or any other operating system as well. So no one gets admin rights. And we always assume breach. So we operate the environment assuming that we have bad people on the network already. So all monitoring is done so that we assume breach. Many security people say that in the world there are only two kinds of companies, those that have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached, and that's how we live now. Zero Trust also changes the old methodology of thinking that we have a separation of an internal network and an external network. Like I briefly mentioned already, this means that we will encrypt all the connections in the internal network as well. So we are kind of like using VPN to get into the environment, even if we are in the environment. I mean, if you sit in your office, you get an internet connection like you would with your cellular or when you're at home. So we don't assume that the internal network is any safer than the external networks. So never trust, always verify. That's a mantra of Zero Trust. So Zero Trust has different components to it. The first is the identity part. So we have to identify our people with a strong authentication. Windows, for example, can provide multi-factor authentication. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but if you use a PIN code on your new Windows 10 laptop, you are doing multi-factor authentication, because that PIN code will only work against the TPM chip or the TPM code that is inside of that particular machine. And one part of Zero Trust is that we need to identify the devices that we're using and usually also measure the health of the device that we're using. So we want to be compliant, and we will allow you inside of our resources based on how healthy you are. Sadly, we still can't figure out the mental health of the user. That would be awesome, but at least to see if the device has like BitLocker, if the device has a firewall and such. When I started working in security, I think for almost 2 decades, if someone asked me what's the two most important security features, I would say principle of least privilege, so no admin rights, and BitLocker, so having encryption on your device. Well, that kind of came into the picture in 2006. But anyway, so those for a long time on all my slides would have been top number 2 things to have if you want to be secure. CIS introduced a list of 20 things to do in your environment to mitigate 99.99% of attacks. Number 1 and number 2 are something that I think I should have always had on my list as number 1 and number 2. And I really, when I read it, I felt a little stupid because I didn't have it before. And the number 1 on the list today is up-to-date hardware inventory, and number 2 is up-to-date software inventory. The ideology here is that you can't secure if you don't know what to secure. And I totally agree with that. And this is one concept of the Zero Trust as well. So we want to have inventory on all applications running. We want to have inventory on the hardware used, so we can get rid of shadow IT and people running applications that we don't know of. Data-wise, we have been encrypting devices for some time, but we really haven't been encrypting all the communications. And Zero Trust also changes the encryption to be more based on the data itself. So the data keeps encrypted when it travels through different medias, instead of being on an encrypted hard drive and then moving unencrypted through the network of your company and ending up potentially on another encrypted device. But now the device encryption starts to move more towards data encryption. So anyone who's worked with Windows for a long time, believe it or not, but EFS is really kicking in and coming back. So the encrypting file system has gotten substantially better with Windows 10 1709, where it started supporting a new file format, where it now supports FAT32 devices as well, or format as well. Infrastructure-wise, we use telemetry, detect attacks, anomalies. We try to figure out when there is network communication that is not supposed to be there. If you have people connecting to the Tor network, or if you have people connecting outside with the PowerShell, but not connecting to a known location we have, like Azure or AWS, for example, then we will log those and alert. So monitoring is very heavily part of Zero Trust. As before, we would probably try to monitor if bad things happen. Now we monitor all the time and everything. Network-wise, internal networks especially were not encrypted before, or not even authenticated. I have actually been using IPsec for 21 years now, and IPsec is something that is a really, really good thing to have in your environments. And IPsec can do both authentication with the AH protocol and encryption with the ESP protocol. And instead of relying that the local network is secure and doesn't need to be encrypted, now we encrypt all communications, even on the internal network. When someone asks me for the most important quote ever in security, I always say that the most important thing for you to keep in mind when talking about security is that in security, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I face this all the time. I find people who are against AppLocker or against BitLocker because they have found a potential weakness in it. So I try to implement a solution and get up to 95% security, for example, but they see that it's not 100%, so we can't use it. So the security department shoots it down because it's not 100% perfect. Why don't you take 95? So that would be something that happens all the time. People will give up on their features because they're not perfect, although they would be really good for you. One important thing in security is, of course, always keeping up to date. So there's a saying on security or in security, if you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. So if you want to be notified of zero-day attacks or threats online from Microsoft, it currently takes about 48 hours to be notified of these, and the average on Twitter today is 7 minutes. So follow me on Twitter, please, as well. But just keep that in mind, and with that, I am going to open this for a few questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Sami. Well, there has been a discussion going on in the chat window, and one thing is it really that security hinders usability? We have, like, from Christian, he's saying, okay, proactive security analytics systems based on machine learning and AI try to help the users already today, which is good. So if I'm logging on from Russia and it says, okay, are you sure you want to log on? What is it then? Is it hindering, enhancing? What do you think?
We always say that it used to be people saying security hinders usability. It used to be like these two things. I always say that security is a triangle. There's three things. There's security, usability, and cost. And when I start a project, I always tell my customers, you can choose two, but you can't get three, which means you can't really get a usable and cheap one. I mean, you can get a usable and cheap one, but it won't be that secure. You can get a secure and cheap one, but it won't be that usable. You can get a usable and secure one, but it won't be that cheap. So I'd rather compare these three things to this. So we do have to put in some money, although the concepts themselves don't really cost or have license cost to it. But I'd still say that you can't just say that they are only usability and security. Money comes into play as well. And although zero trust sounds like it's limiting something, but it is actually built to allow more.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Well, Stefan even says that zero trust networking, the issue is that it has to be governed. No matter what you put in place, it still has to be governed. So you can't just say, okay, well, let's go for it, and then you still have to have measures in place that govern all the tools that are, handled within the system or the infrastructure. Thilo is saying, I observe that a lot of people forget about security at the moment they leave the office and turn to their private IT. And that's the point with the users. Somebody said they make the mistakes. Sometimes they might make mistakes on purpose. So that's probably the main, or one of the main threats. So maybe, what is the biggest security threat to your opinion then? Is it the user, or what is it?
Well, I'd say I wouldn't say that the user is the biggest risk in that sense. I mean, most people are still good people, and most people, we have employees because we have as employees because we trust them. But people do, if you think about ransomware or phishing attacks, and then of course, any attacker, if I would attack a company, the first thing I want to have is a compromised machine. And now getting those compromised machines is way easier than ever before. Before pandemic, in Europe and US, so that's USA, North America, not Canada, I mean just USA and Europe combined, there were more than 800,000 laptops stolen per year on the biggest airports only. And that's only the biggest airports. I mean, of course, we already were suffering from huge amounts of lost devices, but now those devices are taken into homes. They might be used by kids. I mean, and I don't really blame anyone. I personally gave out to charity about 5 or 6 laptops when Finland went to homeschooling, because we have so many families that have like 4 kids, like I do, and they all need a computer when they do homeschooling at the same time. And I'm in IT, but most families will not have 4 computers available for kids to do homeschooling, which meant that now you kind of like, you really are in a way forced to think if you are really able to borrow your laptop to the kid or not.
Right.
And I really get it. I mean, I totally understand the problem. Many people say that if we wouldn't have users, we wouldn't have any problems. But yeah,
Well,
sure, but then no one would be using the systems. So
exactly. You have to have users, you know.
yeah, you have to have users, and we want to have them. I mean,
Yeah.
I generally at least hire people because I wanted to hire them, not because
Absolutely. Thank you. Very good end. And I can tell there's a lot of thank you notes in the chat window. So it's a perfect, I mean, to me, it was a great lecture. Are you available to chat at all? I know you have another lecture.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out for a while, but
okay, good.
Then I'll have to start preparing for the next conference.
Excellent. So let me just switch to German. Falls irgendjemand mit ihm noch chatten möchte, er ist noch ein Weilchen da auf der Plattform. Ansonsten gehen wir jetzt alle zurück in die Lobby zu den nächsten beiden Tracks. Thank you very much again. It was a great lecture and session. Hopefully to see you again soon, and let's meet at the lobby again.
All right.
Thank you
so much for having me.